Welcome everybody, London Salesforce Developers, first meetup of 2021, and in the same sort of environment as 2020, which I don't think many of us thought when we did our first virtual meetup back in April or whenever it was in 2020, but here we are again. So we press on. There's our Twitter handle there, at LondevSFDC. Please follow us, please tweet to us. So our sponsors today, Mobile Caddy, doing the post-production of the videoing. Which must be a bit simpler now that we're recording Zoom and just tweaking that about rather than real cameras. And BrightGen for the Zoom account, which allows us to get as many signups as we did for Erica today, which was like 100, I think it was 163 by the end of it. So we're almost running out. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Great to see you all here. So here's our agenda. Community news, Erica's talk. Some Q&A after Erica's talk, and then a bit more chat of the high quality that we've been having already. So that's something to look forward to as well. Community news, Spring 21. Pre-releases have been around for a while now. There's a sign-up link there. Please remember that pre-releases are kind of that. They're not. They won't necessarily be fully featured. Not everything will be deployed to there, in my experience. And also, while they're the way of sharing the new functionality initially. My experience, my personal experience is that they don't tend to get updated as you get nearer to the actual release window. So if you can get a sandbox, that typically tends to be a bit more robust than the pre-release org. Pre-release is just for kind of finding bugs really. And that's scheduled to go live on the 5th and the 12th of February last time I looked. Safe harbor, forward-looking statement, always make purchasing decisions and all that. The roadmap prioritization is also open. Don't expect too much from a developer perspective, but there's a couple of 3 in there which are around the kind of low no code side of things. So please spend your coins wisely on that and influence the roadmap. And also the videos from Dream TX are now available for anyone that couldn't take the 4 days out to watch all of that. They're all available now to consume at your leisure. And something which came out today from Nathan Totten, the tweet there, the SOCL builder in VS Code. Is getting a bunch more validation and a bunch more this, that, and the other. But he did say it might be slightly delayed because apparently there was something going on in the States today, which was taking up some of their time. Not sure what that was. We also have Todd to tell us a bit more about what's going on with London's Calling. Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Keir. So I'll do a quick intro for people who don't know what London's Calling is. It's Europe's largest Salesforce community conference that's running again in 2021. It'll be our 6th year, I think, now. And it's going to be on March the 20th, so to book that date out. It's an all-day conference with content spanning devs, of course, which is really good. There'll be some talks on advanced development. There's content for admins, architects, general side of things as well. The CFPs have now closed. We've done our blind review of the talk submissions, and I've got to say I'm really excited about what we've got lined up. So far, that's looking really good. Ticket holders from last year should have received an email if you purchase a ticket. That means you get a free ticket for this year, basically because we had to do a quick 180 and go from a physical event to London's Calling TV within like the last week or two before the event. For people who weren't attendees last year, information will be released very shortly about how you can get hold of a ticket for this year's event as well. So yeah, if you're interested in what's going on, you can follow us on Twitter at LDNS Cool, I think it is. London's Cool, LDNS Cool, yep. Go to londonscalling.net and you can sign up for the newsletter. Yeah, so that's coming. I'm really excited and yeah, I can't wait to see you all there. Cheers, Keir, thank you.
Awesome. Can you post the Twitter handle and the link in the chat, please, Todd, to everyone? That'd be great. Okay. And now it's over to Erica to tell us all about Apex triggers. Take it away, Erica. So while Erica shares her screen. Yeah, so we had 160 signups this time, so that was awesome. I hope to see you all at this one and again at future events, and especially at London's Calling.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. So today we are going to talk about Apex Trigger. My name is Erika Machiavelli and I am a developer a bit by coincidence. So just a little bit background about myself. I started my journey in September 2019 doing the Supermom course. And after the completion of the course and my first project, I was going through a round of interviews, and many, although it was for administrator roles, they all asked me if I knew and wanted to learn how to code. And that is pretty much the reason why I'm starting to go that road. So today, after this session, my aim will be that you will be able to read a trigger, and you will not be able to read every single line of a trigger, but I will teach you where to look for the special keywords for you to understand in a big line what a trigger does. I will talk about Apex class and how to check that your trigger is written in a quality manner. And we will look at the best practice of what it looks to have one trigger per object. To do so, I divided this session in 3 parts, and we will be looking at a lot of glossary of terms with what it means in terms of a business, in terms of when you talk with a developer, and in terms of how you will actually see it written in the code. We will give you 2 times the opportunity to win a Salesforce certification voucher for our quiz. And we will be looking at 4 triggers together. So let's get started with what is a trigger. Basically, a trigger is an Apex script, or is an Apex code, or it is just simply put lines of code that will perform one or multiple actions. And those actions for the developers, they are called methods. And those methods happen before or after an event, which means before a record is saved or after a record is saved. So a trigger will always start with the same line. You will have your trigger. You will have the name that you give it. On, you will choose the object, and here you will put your trigger event, which we'll go through later, but this is before or after a record is saved. And so because with Salesforce, it is always better or advised to use declarative tool before you use programming. Always ask yourself those first questions in order for you to start with your first line of trigger. So can I use a flow, workflow rule, or a process builder instead? If you can, then just don't go for a trigger, obviously. And then to write that first line, you will need to know which object start my process, which is the same for process builder or workflow rule or flow. When does the automation start? So when does my method start? Is it before or after a record is saved? And what kind of operation am I doing? Am I creating a new record or updating a new record, etc.? So this is what is a trigger. It's just lines of code that will automate some automation on a list of a record. And the first line always look like this. And to give you some example on why to use a trigger, the main reason will be, there is no black and white reason, but the main reason will be because you're going through a large list of records. And those are, for example, maybe because you want to change a record before it is created or updated in the database. And to give you a concrete example, it will be if you want to use a roll-up summary information, then you will have to use a trigger. If you want to restrict some operation to happen, like do not call if a lead title is from ABC, that will be another example. The main reason I can see we use a trigger is because you want to perform an automation based on a third-party system, i.e. your HR or your finance or your logistic, or if you are looking for a role and you want to showcase how amazing developer you are, you could try to do a trigger, get the information for your Trailblazer Me, and update your skills on your recruiting app. That's just an example. And then finally, you could also use it to delete or to undelete a record. And so those are the 4 examples. There is other example that I could give you, but I thought we will keep it simple for now and give you those examples. So when does the automation start? This is something you have to know. And usually when you speak with developers, they will say, when does your trigger fire? And when they ask you that, they just want to know if it's a before a trigger. And again, is because you want to use or to update or validate the record value before they are saved to the database. Or after trigger, you will use that because you want to access the field value that are set by the system, so record ID, last modified date, etc. That will affect the change in other record. So after trigger is after the record has been saved, and the record that started that trigger is only to be read. You cannot change. So the next trigger, I will give you an example on how you will use after trigger. And then now we will look at before and after and what it means in terms of their operation. So if we want to create an account based on a lead record, where the lead last name will be an account name, that will be an after record. Why? Because again, we say that after trigger is when you want to take information and use it to create or to update another record. And so this is why we need the lead last name in order to do a change on the account record. This is why you will use after trigger. And then here, those are the 2 kind of events, before and after. And for each event, you can complete different DML operation. And DML stands for data manipulation language. It's just a very fancy word to say you can either insert, which is creating, update, delete, and you can also merge or upset records. And for the after trigger, the main difference is you can undelete. So after trigger, you can undelete. You cannot do that on a trigger that has not been saved. So DML is for data manipulation language. And for a before or after trigger, you have certain type of operation that you can do. So we're gonna to look at our first trigger. And our first trigger will be to prevent an account to be deleted if they have related opportunity. And so in order to create our first trigger, we're going to answer those 4 questions. So the first one, for the purpose of the exercise, we're going to say yes. And from which object we're going to start this process? We're going to start this process on the account because we want to prohibit account to be deleted. When the automation starts, we will be doing it before because the action will be delayed. So it needs to be, we start the trigger on the account. It have to be before because we want something to happen before it is deleted. So before the record is saved, this is what we want. So it will be a before and delete operation. And so we're gonna to go through our setup, and I'm first going to show you where you can find your trigger as an administrator. So you will go to the setup and you will type triggers. And here at the bottom, you will see the list of all the triggers. And you can look, you can click, and here you will see, for instance, your code. I do not advise necessarily to make change here. It's always easier to look through the developer console. And to access developer console, you go back to your gear here and you click into developer console. All right, let me remove this. Okay, all right. So to create our first trigger, you will go to File, and we're going to create a new Apex trigger. And here we will give the name that we want. So we'll call account deletion. And here you will see that we write in the camel format. That means the two words are together. And the first word, the second word, will always start with a capital letter. And that is the camel format. You will see it a lot through the code. It's just a way to write. The S subject, we say it was an account because we want to prohibit an account to be deleted. We click submit. And here, as I promised, this is the same line that you will always see. It's the same format, the same syntax. You have the trigger. You have the name of your trigger that we gave. We save the account. And here, this is where we have our events. The events, we will have to change it because obviously we don't want to insert an account, but we want to delete and we want to not delete. So this is our first line. And here in the middle, this is where we can write our code. You can note that when I put some, oopsie daisy, up our code, you can see that when I put 2/, it's written in a different color, and that means this is where your developer or where you can put some comments. This does not tell the computer to do any automation. It's just a way to keep some notes and understand what you are trying to do. If you are an administrator, you can ask your developer to write something for you to understand. If you are a developer, this is where you could put your pseudocode, for instance. I use it a lot for pseudocode for myself. For the purpose of going not too long, here it is the trigger to an account deletion, and we're going to go through the lines. So one thing you will see on a trigger, you will always see the word for. It's always there, and that is because you're going through a loop, through a collection of records. So if you are writing a record and you don't know where to start, then you know you have to start with that line, and somewhere you will have to have a for, always. And here we're going to go through a bit deeper in the soon. This is, we're going to say that we're going through a list of accounts, and this is the name of my list. And this is a query. And my query is basically saying you select the ID from account where ID in, so where you have related opportunity. So select ID from account. This is very simple, but the where ID in, this is where it's mean you are looking at related something, and related to what? You're relating account to opportunity. And then a trigger all, that only mean it's a list of a record. I have to look at my notes because I'm always confused. It is a list of record with the old value. Yeah. That line, it's a bit complicated, but I will say what you have to look, it's that the add error, usually the methods, so where it says which action or operation you are doing to your record, usually it's written in a way that it's easy, so it's add error, and I'm going to show you where you can find other method. So here the method is dot add error, and this is the message that you will get, cannot delete account with related opportunity. So again, you don't have to look through all the lines. If you look at here, you say, okay, I'm looking for an account deletion before it is deleted, And what information I'm looking is opportunity. If my account has related opportunity, I'm having that error message. So let's see how it works in the interface. I will go to accounts. I will go to edge communication. Normally we have a couple of opportunity. Yes, we have some opportunity here. And if I go to delete, here we will see the error message, cannot delete account with related opportunity. And this is what we had here, cannot delete account with related opportunity. And so with that, this is pretty much our first trigger. I think we can take a bit of time to celebrate that moment, because your first trigger is important. Oh, I don't have the sound. Maybe we can. Yeah, all right. Okay, let's do it again, because it was a nice one. We have to celebrate a bit. All right, so we're gonna to look through a little bit of glossary of terms that we just touched a bit through our first trigger, and we're gonna to look at a variable, which variable is a container that stores specific piece of data collected from the customer or output from Salesforce. Basically, a variable is a box where you will put all the records that you are looking for. So you can have a box with your account, a box with your opportunity, a box with red lipstick. Pretty much this is what is a variable. Or in mathematical terms, you know, when you have 1 plus x equal 5, x will be your variable. So hopefully with those visuals, you can understand what is a variable. We use it a lot. And the syntax of a variable is always like this. You will put the data type, the name of your value, the name of your variable, sorry, and your value. We have 3 types of data type. We have the S object, which means if it's an account, an opportunity, it can be any standard or customized object. Primitive are those one here, and we're going to go through it. And enum, to be honest, I forgot now. I rarely use them. So let's focus on the S object, which is for the object or the records that you have, account, opportunity, lead, etc. And the primitive, we have a list here. One to remember is that integer is for numbers. So integer is for numbers. String is for text. And if you want a number with decimal, you will call it decimal. Those are the 3 ones that are a bit odd. The rest is self-explanatory, and it's always the same. For the data type, we can put, for instance, string. Name of the variable, we can put, usually, we avoid to put just a letter, because if you go to read your trigger a couple of months later, or if somebody read the trigger, they might not know what it refers to. But for those are from the Apex Developer Guide. So I'm going to show you, this is pretty much the Bible. So when you have an idea and you don't know how to write it, or you don't know the syntax, this is where you will go. And then here you will have all the example of the primitive data type. And they will tell you all of them and give you examples. So Boolean, yes, true or false. You have date, time. You also have date. Decimal, as I say, is a number that includes a decimal point, and etc., etc. So this is how we write a variable. Integer is for number. So integer is the data type. I is for the name of my variable, and the value is a 1 or 1000 or whatever number you want that to be. And then the last one, list, set, and map. They are a collection of records, and this is what we're going to see next. Basically, a list is a collection of records that can have duplicates, and the order that they enter the list is what will give them this is how they are distinguished. So you can have, for instance, position 1 vanilla, chocolate for position 2, strawberry for position 4, and you could have vanilla again, because what it's important is in which order that they are coming. At the opposite, a set is an ordered collection of elements, and because of that you cannot have duplicates. So you will have, if you have 4 items and you have 2 times the vanilla, then you will only have 3. You will only have vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. And the way you write your variable and the way you see it on a trigger, it is the syntax is my list string. This is my data type, list string, my list, that's the name of my variable, and then equal, this is the value, and my value is I'm creating a new list of strings, and on the parentheses I have nothing. And because I have nothing, that means that later on I have to say what I'm going to put inside. This is a parameter. So this is the usual syntax. The way you will see it on a trigger will be with the information inside, and that's mean on the parameter you could put vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, always with 1 single quote, because if you put 2 it's not going to work, with the comma, and at every end of the variable you always have to put semicolon, which we did for all the other ones. This is the full syntax. So a list is ordered and you can have duplicates. And the opposite, a set is unordered, so you cannot have duplicates. And a map is a combination of 2 values that you can have in a collection. And those 2 values can be from the same data type. So you can have integer, comma, integer, so this is for number, or string, comma, string, etc., etc. You can also have it map a different S object. And here again, it is the same syntax. Here, my data type, the name of my variable, and then here my value. Okay. If you don't know how to write a map or a collection, then again, we go through our little Bible or Quran or Torah. And here you will see, so we are on methods. Let me go here so then you can see how to search in that here. So a collection, casting, iterating collection. Okay, here. Okay, so it's this one. All right, and here you will have the different information about how to write your collection. And if you click to map, for instance, again, they give you a lot of example and why to use them. Okay, so if you don't know, at least here you can find some piece of code that you can copy and then you can update to your needs. So this was for the collections. We had 2 main questions. If I forgot your question, please just like put it on the chat or just raise. One of the question was how to write multiple comments. And let me share my screen. Oh, I'm not able to share my screen.
You're not? You're a co-host.
One participant.
Let me turn you off and turn you on again as a co-host and see if that helps.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, look at Keir bringing out all of his technical support skills.
Guys.
Yes, 30 years of technical support experience comes to the fore.
All right.
There we go. Look, solved.
All right. So for you to write, so let me go. Let it go here. All right. To write a comment, you can put 2/ and then write 1 line of comments. And if you want to write multiple line of colon, you will put a dash here. And then let me do 1, 2, 3, just for you to know. And then you will finish with a star and a dash. And this is how you write multiple line of a comment. So a dash and a star to start, and the opposite at the end, a star and a dash at the end. This is how you write multiple comments. And the question was, could you do with a flow or process builder automation to not delete accounts if they have related opportunity? I think I saw that with the flow, you have an option for delete, but I am not sure for 100%. So if anyone knows the answer for sure, then go ahead. For me, I just know that with flow, you can now have the delete operation, but I don't know if you could do that specific trigger in flow. Anyone has, guys, the developer or the super admins, do you know if you could do that trigger on the flow?
Yes, we can as of winter 21 release, actually.
Okay, so here you go. So, and will that trigger could be used if we go through a large batch of records, or it doesn't matter, we should always go through a flow?
It really depends on the amount of records you want to act on. Actually, flows have specific limits, governor limits
right,
that
so
triggers have a higher governor limits.
All right, so this trigger is not completely useless. We can still keep it as a good example.
It's never useless.
Yeah. Well, if you can do it with flow, you should do it with flow. But yeah, a lot of the limitation are with the governance limits in the order of execution. We are not covering that today, but maybe that could be the topic of another talk. So let's go through our part 2, unless I missed another question from the chat. And I will take the silence for I did not miss.
Our audience have been very good in answering some of the questions that are coming into the chat anyway, so that's really good. Everyone's helping each other. All
right, that's amazing. That's the spirit we want to see. So we talked earlier about how to declare a variable, and now we're going to talk about declaring a method. I have to confess that many times I spoke with developers and they say, oh, did you declare your method? And I was like, why? What does that mean? And what it means is that in my code, I have to write the name of my variable dot the name of my method, semicolon, or the name of my class dot the name of my method, semicolon. So when you hear, where is your instance of your method, or did you declare your method, the answer you are looking for is on that syntax, is the name of your variable dot the name of the method, or the name of the class dot the name of the method. And I'm going to show you example later on. So before we go to methods, the reason why we need a variable is because before you insert a Salesforce record, you kind of have to create in memory first as a record. And like with any other object, the S objects of the record are creating with the new operator. So why did I write that like this? Okay, those are, okay, now I get it. Okay, those are variables. And oopsie daisy. These variables have no value. Okay, we're just saying we are creating a new account. So this is my data type account, the name of my variable equal. We are creating a new account, but we do not say how we're gonna to call our account or what values they will have. So you can declare your variable like this, or you can declare it adding the specific information, and that's the way you will see it on the code. So again, you will have the data type, the name of your variable, you are creating a new record, and then instead of having that empty, you will have the name, which is the field. So that will be the API name of the field equal, again, always a single quote, the name of your account, so ACME, comma, for the font, you will use the single quote, and finally the number of employees. This is endless. You can put all the fields you want. You can put it all in one line, or if you have many different information, you can, actually write it, put a name equal semicolon ACME, comma, and then phone at the bottom and number of employee at the bottom, etc., and just put it one after the other on a different line. Another way you can also add, and we saw it in our first trigger, you can declare your variable and add a method in your variable. You will see that a lot when you are dealing with date. So we're gonna to give you an example. Date is the data type. So it's a primitive data type, date. This is the name of my variable. And then here I will say, okay, I'm creating a new date. So my date dot add days. This is a method. And here I have the value of how many days I'm gonna to add. So I'm just gonna to repeat. Date is the data type, new date is the name of our variable, and here our value is attached to a method. So we'll put the name of our variable, my date, dot the method add days, and in the middle, we're gonna to put the number of days we want to add. And if we want to see a list of methods per data type, we go again to our developer guide. And for instance, here, when you are using a date, this is all the different methods that you can use. You can use it for formats. And then it will give you an example. If you could be on mute. Oh, thank you. And then here you will have an example on how to write a format method. So here again, we will see string is my data type. This is my name of my variable equal my variable dot my method. And then here I say nothing, but I could put it the same way. This is the same date, my date, new instance, and this is the value I want to give it. So you have a lot of examples that you can go through it in the future. And if you don't know, this is again, you will have explanation on how to use those methods and how to write those methods. So when you hear a developer say, oh, did you put an instance of your method, they are talking about the name of the variable dot the name of the method or the name of the class dot the name of the method. And so now we're gonna to go through loops. Sorry, I'm just trying to put it as presenter. Okay, that's fine. Loop. So as I said earlier, we use the word for because the word for is used to say you're going through a loop. And a loop is a programming structure that repeats a sequence of instruction until a specific condition is met. So you have different type of loops. And for you, again, to see different types of loops, you can go to the developer guide, The main one is the for, and you see you have different ways to write and to deal with a for loop, but you have a do loop and a while loop. Basically, a loop is just a list of records, and you're going to have to go through all of them until the condition is met. One thing you have to know is that for a loop is a control flow statement for specific iteration, which allow the code to be executed repeatedly. So for every trigger, when somebody say, oh, your loop is infinite, that means that you have to look that your word for, that's what they're looking, that your for have an end, a start and the end. That's what they mean. It took me a very long time to understand that. But again, the loop is usually what you will see on the code is either for, or it's do, or it's while. And instead of here for, you can have do, and then the same syntax, variable, to point, I don't know how to say that, list or set, and then the code block. When you talk about loop, you have to talk about iteration. And iteration and loop go hand in hand. So the loop is all the list of records, and iteration is the repetition of a process in order to generate an outcome. And each repetition of the process is a single iteration. So it will be a single record. And the outcome of each iteration is then the starting point of the next iteration. So this is like the definition from Salesforce. In the plain English, I will say iteration. So a loop is a list of records that you're going through until they meet a requirement. And the iteration is just your record, one single record. And when you talk about loops and iteration, you have to remember, and this is definitely on the PD1 exam, the Salesforce work on a batch of 200 records of a time. So if you are looking through a loop of 500 records, you will go through 3 loops, so 200 plus 200 plus 100. It doesn't matter if you don't finish the 200 of the loop, you still have to go through another batch. So again, Salesforce work on batch of 200 records at a time. This is on PD1. And also on PD1, when you look at a collection of records in the loop, you start at 0. So if you have a list of 5 items, the last item is not on position 5, it is on position 4. In practice, I don't really use that knowledge that the collection starts at 0, but I'm sure it's because I'm a junior. But again, that will be on the PD1 exam. You will have a question on that. And to look at loops, I already showed you, this is the list, but if you could look on how a while loop look like, this is an example, all right? And we're gonna to go through more in detail. And another thing to look again for triggers is because we are looking through a list of a record, trigger.old mean that you are looking for a list of records that have old value. And the trigger.new at the opposite is a list that return a list of a new record with new value. And I'm going to show you in a practice how you can use them. I'm going to show you 2 times how to use them, one on a specific trigger and one on the trigger where you have all the automation together. So a trigger.old, it returns a list of old records which are updated with new value. And it can only happen, you only use trigger.old for before update or after update or before delete and after delete trigger. So again, before and after, those are events. And update, delete are our DML operation, so data manipulation language. And this is just what you're going to do with the record when it meets the requirement. So before and after are the events. And then for update and delete, those are the two operations you can do on the trigger.old. And for trigger.new, you can use it pretty much before or after trigger, and that will be for insert and update operation. And I think we're gonna to go through our second trigger, which will be to update an account description field with the old phone number and the new phone number that we added. So again, before we use a trigger, we have first to check if we can use it declaratively, so either with flow or process builder. So I will say that you can do it with trigger, and the operation will start with the account object. When does the automation start? And what kind of operation we are doing is we are before updating a record. So let's go to our developer console, and let's write our first trigger. So new Apex trigger. Sorry, I'm losing my mouse here. Okay. Up. We're gonna to call it account phone number, and always in camel format. So account phone number old versus new. Okay, on head subject, we are starting to the account, submit, and then here it is before updating, all right. And then here we rewrite our trigger. So I already have it prepared. So let me just go here. Again, to see the list of your trigger, you tap trigger here on the quick search trigger. And I think I have it here, account phone number and old phone number. Ooh. Oh yeah, that's the one I just created. So let me go back. New phone. Okay, perfect. All right, that's the code. All right, and let's put it here. All right. Oh, and that's not before updating, it's before update. That will be better. Okay, so again, here we have the name of our trigger, the trigger, the name of our trigger, on which object, and before or after the record is saved. So before the record is saved, we want to keep the old phone number information, take the new phone number information, and take those two information into the field description. So if you remember when I was talking about loop and iteration, well, this is why I talked about it, is because sometimes you will see on a trigger, you will see that line, and that line means the far is you are looking through a trigger, and then here it's saying integer is our data type, I is the name of our variable, equals 0. So that means basically you are looking through a loop where the iteration starts at 0. You don't have this sorry, that little bit. It just means you're gonna to look through an unlimited. Well, you're looking through a size, a list size. I don't know exactly why we need it, but this line pretty much you kind of have to learn it, and it is on PD1. Again, they will ask you about that. For me, what I look at is if my developer say, oh, you need to deal with the for and the iteration, I kind of know what they mean. They mean that line, and that line I just learned it by heart. What it means is I'm gonna to do a list of a record of type integer, and the I++ here, that means I'm going from list record number 1 to record number 2 to record number 3. This is the two things that is important. That line is I++. Here, if I put new size and I put 100, that means I will look through only 100 of records, and I will look through one by one. And again, that line, so this piece of code, you kind of have to learn it. And if you see it, just think you're going through a list of records one by one, okay? And then if is pretty much like as we do it on a formula, is a if statement. So if this is my statement, so if this is true, then you do this. And what it's saying is that if all the phone number is not equal, so exclamation point and equal means not equal, is my old phone number is not equal to my new phone number, then I'm gonna to update. So I'm gonna to do trigger.new. I'm gonna to update my description field. And here I'm gonna to put as a value a string. So again, this is with a single quote. And pretty much here I will put my account phone number is, and the value I'm gonna to take is the older value plus, this is how you write it, plus trigger.old, that means the older value of what? Of my iPhone, plus this is what I want to put in my message. So, and the new phone number is always in a single quote, trigger.new, which means the new the new value of my phone. Here we did it with the phone number, but you can also do it with the email. And in that case, you will, instead of phone, which here is the API name of the field, you will put .email, not equal, trigger.new i.email. Okay, so here we did it with phone, but you can do it with other field. And here you can see we have an issue. So when you write some code, sometimes you have an issue, and then it's nice because it gives you which line it is. And basically it's saying I have an extra something. So let's see what it is. And I have, it's just that it's extra. All right. So this is our second trigger. So again, the first line is always the same. You are looking on which object we are dealing. The name is kind of giving us the idea of what we're trying to achieve. And here it is the event. So before the record is saved, we're going through a loop one by one. So every single record one by one. And we're looking at the old version of the phone number, the old value of the phone number is not equal to the new version. And then we are updating the description field with a new message, okay? So we are going to edit the account. And we're going to see if we have, so let's see, this is the description of our account. And we are going to update our phone number. So let's 1, 2, 3, let's do 4, 5, 6. Let's save it. All right, and then if we go to detail, at the bottom, we have exactly what we say, account old phone number is. This is what we have in the red quote. And this is the older value that we had, 1, 2, 3, sorry. And the new phone number is the new value that we had. And this is our second trigger. So again, that example was to talk about the loops, so loops for the iteration, I++, and how to use trigger.old and trigger.new. And with that, we will be continuing with a bit more of terms. So we already touched that, but I'm just going to repeat it. DML is for data manipulation language. and it's used for inserting, deleting, or modifying data in the database. So this is the operation that we do on a record. Salesforce work on batch of 200 records at a time. Again, it is on PD1 exam. When we talk about DML, we have to talk about SOQL queries, which stand for Salesforce Object Query Language, and is basically a piece of code that you're gonna to write. So you're gonna to pull the specific records that you are looking for. The syntax is always the same. It has select, and then you put the field that you want, separated by a comma. And then you have from which object, and then you can put some where statement, as I showed you earlier for where in for related opportunities. And this is an example of a syntax. So select ID, name from account, where name equals ND. Again, if you don't know how to write a Salesforce query, you could go here in the developer guide. Is gonna to be your best friend. So let me go here to do SOQL. And then we're gonna to, okay, let's click here. And it's not giving us SOQL, okay. And then here they're giving you a lot of example on how to write a query. Okay, so for instance, if we take that query, and you want to use it on the developer console, you will go here into the query editor, and this is where you will write your query. So obviously I don't have Sandy as an account, that I think so. So we're just gonna to put the name of Edge Communication. And it's gonna to give you a list if there is more than one. Select ID from account where name equal, okay. And then you will click here, execute. And this is the name of your account and the ID. This is what we ask, the ID, the name. We could also put a phone, for instance. I hope it's called phone. Okay, yeah. And then here we have a new phone number. So you get the idea that if you go to the query editor, this is where, as an administrator, you could use the developer console to do a query of record. You could also do it via Workbench. And if you watch the video from December, I made a presentation on Workbench. And so this is all about queries. We use it a lot on the triggers. And one thing we will hear a lot is you cannot have a query inside a loop. Otherwise, you will hit infinite loop and governance limit. So this is, again, in the PD1 exam. Basically, what they mean is that you first need to create your loop, and then you will say, I'm looking for that record. Otherwise, it kind of go into the infinite. So this is all about when you're looking for data DML, for SOQL, and for query. All of those kind of go together, hands on hands. Okay, so now we are talking about code coverage. And so Salesforce is imposing that the minimum should be 1 person for a trigger and 75% of your global code coverage. And that includes all your trigger, all your class, and all your test class. So as an administrator, you could look off the code coverage or the quality of your code via the Apex test execution or Apex test history. So let's go to here. Let's go here. I will put test. And then pretty much this is where you can go, text execution. No, thank you. And then here you can select, you know, the test that you want to check. So we can check this one, for instance, C. and then it's gonna to test if it's written. And then here it say that my method has been passed, so that's good. You can also go through the history, and here you will see all the tests that has been done in the past. So the one that passed and the one that failed, okay? So for you to have a kind of an assessment on how is the code in your org, you could go to the test execution and see which method is not working, when the method is the operation you're trying to do in the trigger, in the record. And here you will have the test history. You can also check it via the developer console. And then for that, you will go to test. You will go to new run. And here, I'm just going to select all of them. So then it can give you an idea. So you click, so here you click all the test class. You click the methods. And then here you click run. All right. And then you will go to a test. And here it's telling us, okay, that my overall percentage is 80%. So it's okay because it's more than 75%, but let's face it, it's not amazing. And then if we look why, it's because I have two triggers, account phone number old versus old new versus new, and new old phone number description. I did not have an Apex test class for it. And this is why I'm not having a high score. So you can look here to have the overall percentage, and that's what you want to check. And then check per trigger. Or you can also look here, and here is going to tell you what did not pass. And here it was the account trigger handler test. Okay? That was the issue. So in order to fix that, I'm going to talk about kind of the live development of a trigger. I'm not sure if it's proper English, but let's talk about. Let's give an example. We're going to have to try to create an account from a lead. And then we're going to look at how to create a test class for the trigger that we just did. So again, our trigger will have the same format, the same syntax for the first line. So trigger, the name on which object and the event before or after, and which DML operation I want to do. And here it's going to be, we want to create, but we want to create an account from lead. So it will be a trigger on lead and after create. Yes. And so here are all the kind of the keyword before you write your trigger. Those are kind of like the things you have to look for. You have to know, okay, I will have to write my first line, then I have to do a loop because it's like mandatory on a trigger, and then I will have to do some data type, some variable, put the name of my method, check if I need to use a trigger.new or trigger.old, and pretty much with that, we will be able to write our trigger. So let's go back to here. And I think I already created it. Okay, because I didn't want to put myself to shame. So one thing I'm going to do is create account from lead. Here it's our code. All right, and we're going to look for it because it's a bit different. Okay, so again, we go to file. Let me remove this. Okay. So we go to file, we go to new, Apex trigger. And then here we're going to call it, okay, what did we say we were doing? We are creating an account from lead. So accounts creation from, sorry, I'm not using the camel case. It's not account creation from lead. And then here we are using the lead. Okay, we are using the lead. The lead is the object that will start the automation. So here we go, lead, submit. And then here we have our first line, which we have to change because what we want to do is we want to create an account. I think it's before insert. Okay, because that is the DML operation for to create a record, and we are doing it after the lead is created. So it's after insert, and then here this is what we're gonna to do. We are doing a for because it's like pretty much, as you know, is kind of mandatory. So we are doing a loop. And here, this is our data type, lead. Then LD is the name that we gave for our variable, and the value is we are creating a new record, and that new record will be I'm creating a new account. So from the lead that is new, it's created, newly created. I'm going to create an account. So this is my data type again, the name of my variable, and new account is my value, but my value is empty, as I gave you an example earlier. And then here I'm saying that my account name will be my lead last name. I could also put, for instance, my account phone will be my lead phone, and then it finished by a semicolon. And then here we have this line that we never saw before, and that is because when we are in an after trigger, so after a record has been saved, we have to say to the trigger that we want to save the operation. And this is why we have to write insert, which is what we want to do. My variable that I created, I want to insert that specific account. So again, that line, you will only see it if it is after trigger, and it will be insert account. If I put delete, it will be delete ACC. If it was updating, it will be update here and update here. So those two here go together, but only and only if it is after trigger. And this is a DML operation. It just says you are inserting an account. And that will be for a third trigger. And now we're gonna to look when we create our trigger. The next step will be to create a new test class to check that our trigger is working properly and that we are passing the code coverage that Salesforce is giving us. So to create, let me first to show you where are your Apex class. So you go here. Instead of writing trigger, just write class. And then here, under custom code, you will see your Apex class. So you go here. And here you will have all your class that you have. So in my org is not a good example because a lot of them are for test. But in your org, they will be for test and for other object that you are wanted to create. So for the purpose of that session, we're going to go create account from lead test. And we're going to look at how to create a lead test class. So we go to the file and we create a new Apex class. Okay, testing is always on the Apex class. Even if you test a trigger, it will be an Apex class, yes. So the name of your Apex class should have the word test and should have the same name then your triggers, just for you to, when you check if you have the test class for your trigger, to kind of easily see them connected to each other. So we're going to create account, always in camel cases. So account creation from lead, and then I will write test at the end. Okay, so we put the same name of our trigger for us to know, and then we write test, so we know this is the test class of our trigger. And then here we will have our test class. Because it's a test class, actually the first line, and this is something you just have to learn, is that it starts by at is test. And this is the name of your, this is a class, and this is the name of your class. Okay, and this is pretty much where we will put our code the same way we did it for a trigger. And so I'm just going to copy everything here. Let me move that bit down. Okay, so when we create a class, oh yeah, okay, all right, yeah. A class has to be private by definition. And again, it's just a rule because you only use that class to check the code coverage of your trigger. So this line was written directly by Salesforce. I had to update private. I'm just going to remove that. Okay, and then here I will write private because it is a test class, private, okay. And okay, so when you create a test class, you have a lot of errors. Okay, so we have first to create dummy data in order to test that our class is working properly. So let me check my, I'm seeing a lot of error and I'm getting confused. Oh, everything it's on line 5, and that is because it should be like this. All right. So when we start the test, we put is test. Okay, let me see. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go and see what is the problem here. It doesn't look I'm missing anything. So let's restart. And let me see. Okay. Oh, I know, silly me. I needed to, the reason why I had the error is because I had too many of those, it's not parentheses, but I have too many of those, and this is why it was always giving me an error on line 5. Okay, so now we know where was the error. And by the way, I never write a trigger or an Apex class that have no error from the beginning. It have never happened yet, maybe one day. But again, when we write a test class, it has this name, is test. It is always a private class because we are only using that piece of code to check the code coverage of our trigger. The name of our class is the name of our trigger with test at the end. And then here we are testing the method. And this is pretty much how you will use all your test class. You will, if in one trigger you have a couple of methods, in your test class, you will also write a couple of methods. And how to know when a method starts and a method finish, it's with those brackets. If anyone knows the name, because I feel I'm going to use it a lot, and I don't think I'm using if it's a bracket or parenthesis, but for you to know when a method starts and end, you will click, and this is pretty much where the method starts. It starts here and it finishes here. Okay, and that means it's just the end of the class. And here we are putting the name of our method, okay, which was create an account from lead. This is the name of our method. This line is pretty much the same syntax for all test class. It is always is static, is test, static, void, and the name of your method. Pretty much it's always like this. And then here we're gonna to create our dummy data. And the dummy data here, we're saying, okay, we are gonna to create a list of lead. So this is, you know, my variable, my data type, list of lead, the name of my variable, and my value is I'm creating a new list of lead with no information. And here I'm doing a loop. So I'm doing a loop where I'm creating 10 records, okay? And I'm going to create 10 records, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, because I have I++, and it's going to be a new lead. And my lead, the last name will be Jupiter, first name Apollo, status open, company Cosmos, list of lead.add. This is my method. So here we are saying I did create a list. So I create my list, and inside my list, I add all the 10 leads that I created. That's exactly what that code is saying. So I repeat, the list of lead is the name of my list, of my variable of my list, and it's always like this in a test class. You create a list, and inside you create a list of something, so a list of lead or a list of account or a list of opportunity. And you have to add those opportunities. So the way to write it is the list, the name of your list, dot add the method, and what you are adding, the value that you are adding in your list is the variable of your record. So the variable of the record of this record, of the lead record. And then, because it is a class, in a class, you always have to insert the DML operation. So either you, well, for a test class, you are always creating dummy data, so you are always inserting. But this line, again, it is always necessary because you are working on a class, and the class does not save itself. On a trigger, before a trigger, it's a before trigger, and it knows that at one point it will be saved because we are coming in the middle of the process. But for an after trigger, and when you are creating a class, you have to tell the in the code that you want that operation to be saved. If you do not write that line, pretty much your work is going nowhere because it is not saved in the database. So again, you don't have to remember everything, but to you always have to create a test class when you write a trigger in order for you to check the code coverage. And to create a test class, it is a class, not a trigger. It starts by is test. It is always a private class with the name of your class and the test at the end. And pretty much those lines for all the tests, it's pretty much the same. You create a fake data, and this is how you create fake data. And you have to insert that data. Okay, and this is pretty much your first test class together. And finally, we are looking, well, I think we already covered that, what is a trigger and the Apex class. We didn't, okay, let me talk you about trigger handler. We talk about, oopsie daisy, let me go back, okay. So you need an Apex class in order to check the code coverage or Apex trigger. And because Salesforce is telling us that they want one trigger per object, that means that in order for you to have a trigger that makes sense to read, because before I was very scared to look at the trigger because I thought, oh my God, it's going to be thousands of lines of code. I will not know when the method start and the method end and how to go from the bottom of my code. And actually now the way you write a trigger, it is very different. So let me show you on the next slide. The way you write a trigger is like this. Your trigger look like this here. And it is again the trigger, the name of your trigger, and you keep it simple because it's one trigger per object, on which object account. And then here we put all the DML operation before and after a record is saved. And this is pretty much the syntax for trigger per object. And then here you will put if the trigger is before, and then you will put all the operation that they can do on the before. And before it is before insert, before update, and before delete. And for after event, you will have if trigger is after, you will have, this line will be if trigger is insert, update, delete, and delete. And pretty much here we will have the name of our class and the name of our method, and if it is a new value or an old value. Usually what you see here is pretty much how your trigger should look like if you are complying with the best practice that Salesforce asks us to do, that is one trigger per object. So obviously here, because we're calling a class, this is what the account trigger, this is what the trigger handler is doing. A trigger handler is a class that is where you put all your automation, so where you put all your methods. And that is the main difference, is that before we saw how to write a trigger, and it is the same thing. You will still need to have the for, you will still need to have the name of your method, but in order to have one trigger per object, then you create one account trigger, and you will have all the name of the class dot the name of the method and trigger dot new. You can put trigger dot old, but so far from my experience, I always put trigger dot new. So it's kind of like the same way you kind of have to learn the syntax for here is the same for this line. So you create an account trigger. After you create an account trigger, you create an account handler, and this is where you will put here. This is where you put your automation, okay? And to check that your automation is working, then you will create a test class to check that your method is working. And your test class will be look like this, the same way we have it in the developer. And we will put the name of our method, and then we'll check every single one of the method. So this is the best practice from Salesforce, and I'm gonna to show you how to see how it is in real. So for you to check from a trigger, we can do it from here, or from the developer console. We can go to open, and we will go to trigger, and on the trigger we'll go for account trigger. And this is that's a template for how your trigger could look like. So again, this is a trigger with the name of your trigger, on which, I apologize, on which object. And here, this is all the operation you can do for a before event or after event. So before a record is created or after a record is created. And then we have if is before. And then we will put all the operation, the DML operation we can do. So is created, is updated, is deleted. And we will have another if statement for is after. And then again, we will put the name of the DML operation we can do. So insert, update, delete, and delete. And so when you will want to create a new automation, you will do that. You will go, so I already did the example. So I'm just going to go to a test class, and I'm going to go to the account trigger handler. Okay. And basically what we will do is we will start writing here. We will write our new method. So you start here, you finish here. Okay. So basically Okay, I'm gonna to do a comment here. Okay, Erika adding a method. All right. And then I'm just going to finish it. So again, for you to write multiple comments as it was asked before. And then here I can add, why are you doing this? Voila. And then here I can add the name of my method. So here I will put name, and always in camel case. So name of my method. Okay. And then pretty much then I will change. Yeah, I know this method already exists. Yeah, I know. So, and then here I will put my automation as I will write it for a trigger. And because it is a text class, I will need to have that line. So insert task list or update task list or delete task list. And name of I will write that method, then I will go to the account trigger, and let me put that's the name of my method. And then let's say we are doing this for insert, and for before insert, we will go to our account trigger. We will go to before insert, and then here I will write, here I will put the name of my class. So it is account trigger handler, sorry, dot the name of my method. I put trigger dot new and then semicolon. And with that, I finish create a trigger. So I created my method in the account handler, and I have to add the DML operation because we are in the class. And on the account trigger, I add here the name of the class dot the name of my method trigger.new. So when as an administrator or as a developer, I want to understand what is happening on my trigger, I don't have to read all of that, you know, and we are lucky there is only 3 methods, but imagine when there is 20 methods in one class, it's very long. So you just have to go here, and then basically you will look for, okay, is it before or after event? And here I will say, okay, I'm updating my account address, I'm creating a task for a new account, etc., etc. So it's like an executive summary of your trigger, and I found that is it is beautiful. I was very scared before to open a trigger, and now that I see it like this, it's so beautiful, magical, and it makes you want to be a developer because it's not so threatening. And so again, the development cycle of the trigger is we create our method in the handler class, then we update our account trigger, and then we will create or update our test class, and then we're gonna to go here, account trigger handler test class, and then here I will write another method to test my new method. So I will put is test, and then I will put that, copy it, save it, and I could run my test. I'm not gonna to do it because I didn't create the actual method, but I hope you get how a trigger and a trigger handler and a test class all work together. And so if as a developer they ask you to write a trigger, this is what is expected of you, and as an administrator, you will now be able to have an overview of all your automation on the account trigger if you follow the best practice of Salesforce of 1 trigger per object. And to see more in detail what is happening on which automation, you could go again to the account of the trigger handler, and then you will look for the name here of the method. Okay, and for you to know when the method start and the method stop, you will have to check for a public or private static. Usually the name of the method is it's very self-explanatory, and you look for the brackets. And this is when it starts, this is when it stops. All of this is what will explain what is your method. And for instance, this method is saying, we are updating an account address. That's my method. And I'm looking for a list of accounts. And I'm gonna to add a list of accounts. Now I'm gonna to look through some accounts. And if my shipping date is not equal, so not equal is exclamation point equal, not my billing state, then I will update my shipping state to my billing state. And again, because it is a class, I will have to add the DML operation. So I will have to add the name of my list dot the name of my method of my DML operation. So add, and the record, the information I want to add, the ACC from the variable. So I want to update my shipping state to my billing state. And I think that will finish with the overview of the trigger essentials.